Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the LSU Sports Insider podcast. I'm Zach Ewing with Reed Darcey. Our Lundi Gras edition focuses on women's basketball. Hope everybody is enjoying the holiday weekend, or if you had to work today, maybe you can get out a little bit early and enjoy Mardi Gras tomorrow. Reed, I'm going down to New Orleans for some Lundi Gras parades tonight. I'm avoiding the weather, although that was not planned. It certainly seems strategic at this point.
Yeah, it does. I've got some major FOMO this year, Zach. I haven't been able to make it down, and I don't think I will be. I'm just, so busy. But it's March. It's a busy season, for me and my job. So it's not ideal, but it's all right. I can manage.
Yeah, the late Mardi Gras does not work well with a college basketball beat writer. That is true.
Yeah.
But speaking of my strategy to avoid the weather, which I stumbled into, Kim Mulkey with some interesting strategy here, and we can talk about whether this was, whether her hand was forced here and exactly how bad things got with Flau'jae Johnson. But let's just start with the news itself. So Kim Mulkey, before yesterday's game against Ole Miss, announced that, or she put on the SEC availability report, that her star, Flau'jae Johnson, who's, kind of the poster girl for this whole season, and was LSU's bona fide star coming into this season and a major reason they've been ranked in the top 10 all year long, would not play on Sunday. And then it was after the game, I believe, she said that she will also not play in Greenville, South Carolina this week for the SEC tournament.
Well, that was actually before the game. She does a pregame interview with LSU's radio broadcast before every game, and that's when she said that she was shutting Flau'jae down through the SEC tournament. So before that, we knew that Flau'jae had something going on with her leg. We wasn't quite sure what it was, because if you remember when LSU played Texas, she was also on the availability report and she popped up. She was questionable initially, and then she was game time decision. She wound up playing 37 minutes in that game, and after the game, Mulkey said she was fine. So since then, she hadn't popped up on the availability report, so it was a bit of a surprise that she did on Saturday. And then obviously it was an even bigger surprise, I think, that Mulkey said that she was shutting her down. But yeah, I think it's because she's got this shin inflammation or shin splints, whatever you want to call it. Seems like a nagging deal, seems something that really can only get better with time and only can get better with rest. And I think that's what LSU is trying to do here. They're trying to give it some time to heal and subside and wait for that pain to go away, because they want her at full health, 100% by the time the NCAA tournament gets rolling.
Yeah, and that's the risk here, right? And anybody who's had shin splints knows rest helps. It's not something like you can't get up and run around, but it's painful. It affects you. And I guess the question would be, Reed, how much do you think it affected Flau'jae? Because her numbers, she started out the season very hot. Her numbers in SEC play have kind of gone down, but of course you're facing tougher defenses. But they've really gone down the last couple of weeks, especially her shooting numbers. And it kind of bottomed out Thursday in Tuscaloosa. She went 2 of 12 from the floor in an overtime loss against Alabama. Do you think the injury has had a major impact on her, or maybe she's just in a slump?
I think it does. I think against Alabama, she wasn't really herself. She wasn't moving as well as she usually does. She wasn't in a rhythm like she usually is, and her shots weren't falling like they usually did. I believe she had one field goal attempt in the first half, maybe 2 points or so. She got to the free throw line, but there was something clearly different. And whether that was just a bad game for her, a bad night, or whether it was some pain that she was dealing with, I think it was probably the latter. Something just seemed off, because she's usually been rock solid, consistent. Before LSU lost to Alabama, she had scored in double figures in 38 straight games. In every game this season. So you could always count on her to get north of 10 points, get around 15 points, and really help LSU win that way. But she couldn't do that against Alabama. And so I think, after the game, she tweeted something like it was how that loss was on her, and that she, was going to be better moving forward, and that she bounced back. So I think, it probably affected her quite a bit, because she didn't really move as well as she usually does, and she couldn't score the ball as well. So I think it absolutely affected her. And after that game, she probably sat down with Kim Mulkey, and they probably made a collective decision, I would assume, to just take it easy for these next couple of weeks and make sure that her mind and her body is right before the games really start to matter.
Yeah, it's hard to say that. I mean, that's really where we're going to spend the bulk of our time today. It seems like, okay, the games really matter in the NCAA tournament. We know that. The question is, how much do the games before that matter? Because clearly, without Flau'jae helping to run the show, LSU's not a deep team to begin with. You take her away, they're certainly not a deep team. They've really only got 6 other players who get any minutes at all, and so it's obviously makes your rotation much shorter, especially when you talk about an SEC tournament scenario where you could potentially play 3 games in 3 days. They turned the ball over a bunch in a loss to Ole Miss. They kind of faded down the stretch, which is something you'll see when you don't have that depth in yesterday's regular season finale. So, the question is, you said it was a collective decision. Do you think that both of them sat down and said, look, if we don't play you to the NCAA tournament, here's what could happen. We could cost ourselves a seed line, maybe even 2 in the NCAA tournament if we lose a bunch of games. Lose to Ole Miss on Sunday, then let's say lose in the SEC tournament opener Friday. But if we cost ourselves 2 seed lines, that still means we're a number 4 seed. That still means we're hosting in the first 2 rounds. And if that means we can give you what basically is going to be 3 full weeks off by the time Flau'jae plays again, because it would be Friday or Saturday of March 21st or 22nd, and she wouldn't have played since February 27th. So 3 weeks off. That gives us the best chance to advance, get into the Sweet 16. And if it costs us a better matchup in the Sweet 16, then so be it.
Yeah, I think when I said it was a collective decision, I really more probably meant to say it was more Kim Mulkey's decision, because that's what she said after the game. She said it was her decision. She said it wasn't the doctors, wasn't the trainers. It was her decision. But I bet you, if I'm imagining how it went down, I bet you they probably sat down and came to some kind of agreement. Whether Kim Mulkey sort of forced Flau'jae out is another question. I'm not sure. But if you haven't figured it out by now, Kim Mulkey does not particularly care about the conference tournament, right? She said she didn't really care about it when she was at Baylor. She doesn't care about it now, especially because LSU is a 3 seed in the tournament. She said, if we're in that position, then it's not going to hurt us. It's not going to help us too much, especially since they're really in good position to host in the NCAA tournament, which is really what she cares about the most. And we've said this on the podcast before, Zach. I don't think it really matters to her a whole lot. It might matter to fans, but I don't think it matters a whole lot to her if she's a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed, or a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. She just wants the home games in the first 2 rounds, right? And so no matter what happens in Greenville this weekend, I don't think LSU is going to fall out of that mix. I think they're pretty safe to be a top 4 regional seed, which means they'll be starting the tournament in the PMAC. And that's what really matters to Kim Mulkey. So we can break down, of whether, what the difference is between being a 2 seed or a 3 seed or a 3 seed or a 4 seed, or how much they can fall and how that affects their path to the Final Four if they play stiffer competition. I don't think it matters a whole lot to Kim Mulkey, at least is what she's projecting publicly. So they're going to go there, and she said they're going to do our best. But if they lose, they lose, and I think it's kind of tough for fans to wrap their head around, to say like, hey, are we just punting on this thing? It's the SEC tournament, it's a big deal. But I think that's kind of what's the risk that she's taking, especially when you have a player who's not 100%.
Yeah, it's certainly a risk, but I do think it makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Like, the chance of LSU falling to a 5 seed, that seems very unlikely at this point. That would mean you're not one of the top 16 teams in the country. You don't have one of the top 16 resumes in the country. And even if LSU were to lose its first SEC tournament game on Friday, you're still 27-5. You're still one of the top 16 teams in the country by resume. Finishing 3rd in the SEC, I think, gets you one of those top 4 seeds. And again, maybe we're having a different conversation, Reed, if they had a chance at a number 1 seed, and especially if you could get a number 1 seed and say, okay, put us in Birmingham for the regional instead of Spokane. That's a big difference. Our fans can get to Birmingham. Yeah. Probably not a lot are getting to Spokane. So that makes a difference. But if you're not a 1 seed, that's kind of luck of the draw anyway. It just depends on which region you're put in.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we should play a little devil's advocate here, because I think we should say, like, it's just like, LSU doesn't want. If you're LSU, do you really want to start the NCAA tournament coming off 3 straight losses? Right, it's something they haven't done yet under Kim Mulkey. They've lost 2 in a row a couple times, but they've never lost 3 in a row. And so is that how you want to end your season before you get started in the games that really matter? Do you want to put your confidence at risk? Losing 3 straight games. Do you want to have that downturn in your season before you really start to play do or die games? I don't know. It is a risk. It is something that it's a difficult decision, but I think Kim Mulkey, she's been in these situations before throughout her career. She's seen pretty much everything you could possibly see, and I think that informed her decision. And I think, I remember, I look back on it, she did something very, very similar last year around this time. Michaela Williams, who was a freshman at the time, she had this nagging case of plantar fasciitis in one of her feet. And I remember that she missed a couple games in the SEC tournament, but I didn't remember exactly how it played out. So I look back. Turns out Mulkey sat her for the regular season finale, and they played Kentucky. LSU won that game, but they decided to sit her for the regular season finale, and then she missed the first 2 games of the SEC tournament. So it was a very similar situation, very similar calculated risk, and it's kind of a similar injury. Plantar fasciitis is one of those nagging things that can only get better, through time and through rest. And LSU made a decision to sit her down, and it ended up paying off for them because they made it to the conference tournament title game, and then they made it to the Elite 8 in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, different situation now. Flau'jae in SEC play, she's averaging close to 17 a game. Last year, Michaela was averaging around 12 a game against SEC teams. And now the SEC is a lot tougher than it was last year, right? In the poll that just came out today, the SEC has 7 teams ranked in the poll. Last year, there was only 2, LSU and South Carolina, right? So the path through the SEC tournament was not nearly as difficult as it is now, and LSU wasn't coming off 2 straight losses and 3 losses in their last 5 games. They had won their last 8 games of the regular season. So different situations, but kind of the same calculated risk, and then we'll see how it pays off.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think you raise a good point, because if you're just playing a video game and saying, oh, I can rest this player and she'll be 100% healthy for the games that matter, even if I lose this game, yes, let's do it. There's human emotion involved here. There's momentum involved here, all those sorts of things. So do you want to lose 3 in a row? No. I mean, I would think, I haven't looked this up, Reed, but I would say probably, especially in women's basketball, but on the men's side as well, probably not too many national champions lose 3 straight games going into the NCAA tournament. I would think that would be very rare. So you don't want to, I mean, to me, that makes Friday's game pretty important, and we'll preview the SEC tournament here in a minute, just to get one back in the win column and know what that feels like, get some confidence back. And then if you lose after that against, say, Texas, okay. That's a tough team, and at least you've got some confidence back that you can beat a quality team. And again, we'll talk about it, but it does look like LSU may play Alabama, and they may get a chance at some revenge in that quarterfinal game on Friday. So tell you what, let's take a quick 30-second break. When we come back, I want to dig into the Alabama and Ole Miss losses just a little bit, and then preview the SEC tournament as we continue to kind of frame it in this discussion of Kim Mulkey sitting Flau'jae Johnson to get her healthy for the SEC tournament. We'll be back right after this on the LSU Insider.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. With quick picks, you can tap right into pre-built, ready-to-bet parlays right from the home screen. And if you miss tip-off, no worries. You can play same-game parlays live during the action. Plus, it's never been easier to find and bet on the biggest matchups of the day, so you can keep up with all the action. Caesars Sportsbook, proud partner of the NBA and the only sportsbook app with Caesars Rewards. Download it today.
Okay, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider. Encourage you to subscribe to our LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Give us a like on the video while you're down there. That helps spread the video. And comment what you think about Kim Mulkey's decision to bench Flau'jae Johnson, both for the Ole Miss game, a home regular season finale loss yesterday at the PMAC, and then for the upcoming SEC tournament, trying to rest those aching shins for the NCAA tournament, which begins March 21st. Talking with Reed Darcey. He's our advocate LSU women's basketball beat writer. And Reed, besides the Flau'jae Johnson conversation, LSU did not have a good week. And again, those two things are part and parcel, right? Like not having your star player and certainly not having her 100% is going to hurt. But they lost as many games this week as they had lost the entire season. They were 27-2, fell behind Alabama on Thursday, staged a rally. We've seen that before, but this time they could not pull out the victory. They lost in overtime in Tuscaloosa. And then it was the opposite, something we haven't seen before on Sunday where they had the big lead. LSU had a 13-point lead at halftime and could not hold it against Ole Miss. So is there a common denominator in these losses? Were there any red flags for you? Is it just a team kind of getting a little worn down at the end of the season? Where do you come down on this?
Common denominators that they're both close games. And if you remember, Zach, last week we talked about close games and regression to the mean, right? And I think there's a little regression here, right? All the close games that LSU played, we kept saying that, they keep winning these close games, right? It hasn't regressed yet. Well, it sort of hit some regression here in the last week or so. I think if you look at the Alabama game, LSU has gone down before. I think the ESPN broadcast showed a stat. They were tied for the lead in the country with most comeback wins when they erased a 10-point deficit, something like that. They had 5 or 6, but they couldn't get it done against Alabama. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with free throws. And that was kind of a repeat of the Texas loss as well, when LSU missed a bunch of free throws down the stretch of a close game, and that really did them in. But against Alabama, LSU shot 23 free throws. That was the same number that Alabama shot. LSU made 14 of them, and Alabama made 17. So that's a difference of 3 free throws and a 3-point loss, right? So that's probably one of the main reasons that they lost. And another reason was that they just couldn't find enough offense down the stretch. They couldn't get enough good looks, couldn't get enough easy shots, and then they didn't just fall. I think Michaela Williams got a decent shot at the end that would have sent the game to double overtime, but by then LSU had missed a couple free throws that sort of took away their chance of winning the game with that shot. And Alabama also played good defense as well. And the officiating was kind of questionable, as Kim Mulkey said after the game. So that was what stood out to me from the Alabama loss, I think.
Yeah, that one struck me as and some of the calls, probably more calls went against LSU than for them, but there were some wacky calls both ways. I mean, it was I felt like the officials had lost control of that one a bit.
Both sides. So there were some rough calls for both teams. I think that's what Kim Mulkey said after the game. And she usually doesn't say that point blank. She usually doesn't make a point to call out the officials after the game, but that's what she did. She said it was a poorly officiated game, so that was kind of unusual for her to say something like that. There was one play where Alabama, a player leaked out. I forget who it was, but she caught the ball and then had a layup, and they called a travel. It was clearly not a travel. She took 2 steps, and then that was just a bizarre call for me. So that was the one that stuck out for me. And then Flau'jae got hacked a couple times. They didn't call it. So yeah, kind of a rough game for the officials there.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I saw in a basketball game of any level a travel called that wasn't a travel. Usually you see the opposite of, you get away with that extra step all the time, but you don't usually see them just called like that randomly. So strange game. And then Sunday, Reed, to me, this one, again, you don't have Flau'jae Johnson, and so maybe you excuse it. I found it a little more disconcerting just because LSU had the lead. They've been able to salt those games away. They're playing at home. Clearly, you want to win on your senior night. And so the fact that they lost control of that game may be a little more concerning to me. But again, without your best player, it's hard to it's hard to fault them too much.
Yeah, I agree. And that's twice now where LSU has blown a double-digit second-half lead and lost. Remember, they went up double digits in the second half against Texas, and they lost that game too. This was a really rare loss for them, right? They usually win at home. The teams don't come into the PMAC and win very often. South Carolina had done it twice, but that was the only 2 times under Kim Mulkey that LSU has lost a regular season game to an SEC team at home, right? Ole Miss was the first team not named South Carolina to come in and to the PMAC and win against the Kim Mulkey coached LSU team. So yeah, it was pretty significant, I think, that loss, because it's just so surprising, right? You expect them to win these kinds of games. Ole Miss is a pretty good team, right? And we expected them to challenge LSU. even though LSU didn't have Flau'jae Johnson. But I think just the way that LSU lost, right? They got up 13 points, 15 points in the third quarter, and then they gave it away. And I think it's all because they didn't get enough scoring from anyone else besides Anissa Morrow and Michaela Williams. Those two combined for 53 points. In the second half, I believe they scored all but 9 of LSU's points. LSU got 9 points from players not named Morrow or Williams in the second half, and that they couldn't keep up with an Ole Miss team that really caught fire from 3-point range and shot it really efficiently from the field. Ole Miss, give them credit, they did a good job of finding productive offense, and LSU couldn't keep up, especially since they were committing so many turnovers. 23 turnovers, Zach. That's a season high. Their previous season high was 21. The ball handlers struggle against that full court pressure that Ole Miss put on LSU, is similar to what Texas did to LSU. And so I think look at that. That's a bit of a point of concern how they set a season high in turnovers in the last game of the regular season. You're supposed to have those kind of ball handling issues figured out by now, but now they might be headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I think that's important to see them solve on Friday too. Like, you want to see a clean game. You want to get back in the win column. Some of these things are cliche, but you kind of want to be playing your best basketball come March. And I understand it's going to be a tough road in the SEC tournament without Flau'jae Johnson, but you want to see the rest of the team play a little bit better and maybe find some other spots to get contributions, right? Because that was one thing. Without Johnson in there, there's a chance for some of these other players who don't get as many minutes to step up and maybe see a few more. And I'm not sure any of them really stuck out on Sunday.
No, I mean, it was really Kaylin Gilbert. That's the one you really wanted to see find her groove, and she never really got going. She was decent in the first half. She had about 7 points in the first half, but in the second half, she kind of disappeared, right? She had 4 points in the third quarter. Then she only played 2 minutes towards the end of the fourth quarter. I think it was because LSU needed ball handlers, right, to break all that pressure that Ole Miss was giving them. And so I think LSU has ball handlers that it wants in that kind of situation. And then when it's not Kaylin Gilbert, right, that's not what she's best at. She's more of a scorer who can come in off the ball. So I think LSU made a conscious decision to put Last Year Poa and Miracle Shepherd in there because they needed extra ball handling. The problem is you have those two in the game. You can't really have KG in the game because that would give you a really, really small lineup. You'd probably get hurt on the glass, and it would also hurt your ability to get the ball into the front court, right? So I think that kind of problem, that's something that LSU needs to solve. Of course, it could help if KG, I think, is in more of a rhythm offensively. She's been inconsistent throughout SEC play. She started off really hot, but then she fell into the slump, and then she got it back, and then it's been kind of rough for her ever since. So yeah, you want to get more from her, especially without Flau'jae Johnson. She's got an opportunity to step up, and I think 11 points on 4 of 10 shooting which is what she finished as. 5 turnovers. That's not going to cut it. The 5 turnovers.
I was going to mention the 5 turnovers. And she's not a high usage player. Like, she's not going to be bringing the ball up the court or even touching it on every possession. So to have 5 turnovers in 21 minutes that's a lot.
Yeah, and that's not her game. And when you take her off the floor for ball handling, right? LSU's ball handlers, Cheyenne Day-Wilson, Last Year Poa, and Miracle Shepherd, none of them can really score, as well as KG can, right? I don't think LSU really trusts them to hit open shots, and I think the way that teams defend LSU, they're totally happy with leaving them open on the perimeter and forcing them to take shots. So it's sort of like you want more ball handling, but if you have the ball handling, then you sacrifice the scoring. If you want more scoring, you have to sacrifice the ball handling. It's kind of like a catch-22 situation there.
All right, so next, LSU heads to Greenville, South Carolina for the SEC tournament. Reed, we promised you the floor to voice complaints about Bon Secours Wellness Arena. I don't know if you have a quick 30-second rant about this place or you just want to pass.
Yeah, so the Wi-Fi is really unreliable. You need a hardwire connection for some reason.
Roof leaks.
Yeah, Rab had that issue the year they won the national title. The roof leaked. The year 2023, the roof leaked. 2024, the roof did leak, but not on the court. The roof leaked on us while we were sitting in the media room in the back. So they had to take a couple trash cans and put it under the leak, and we had to work in that kind of situation. So not a great arena, but the SEC renewed their contract with them, so we're kind of stuck with it for the next few years.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I know Rab said this last week, but I don't, having the tournament in Greenville, South Carolina is fine. Does it need to be there every single year when it's clearly not a great place? I mean, I know it's great for the Gamecocks; they get to bring a bunch of fans, but from that perspective, if you put it in Nashville, like the men's tournament, you'd certainly get a lot of Tennessee fans. If you put it in New Orleans, you'd certainly get a lot of LSU fans. If you put it in Houston, you'd get a lot of Texas and Texas A&M fans. I mean, there's other places we could have this thing. It doesn't have to be every year in Greenville, South Carolina. But
yeah, I think Rab wants to see it shift a little west some. Now that Texas and Oklahoma are in the league, that could make it a little more centralized, and so that those fans could come in and see the games more easily. They won't have to travel all the way to the East Coast, So
yeah,
we'll
but
see.
As you said, they renewed the contract, so SEC women's tournament will be in Greenville for the foreseeable future. LSU is the number 3 seed in this year's bracket. It's interesting. Of their 4 SEC losses, 3 of the teams that beat them are on their half of the bracket. The only one that's not is South Carolina, which won the coin flip against Texas. I mean, the teams were as deadlocked as deadlock could be. They split their 2 meetings and they won every other game. So there's no well, how did you do against this team and versus this? They won every other game and they split with each other. So it came down to a coin flip, and South Carolina won the coin flip. They're the number 1 seed. So LSU will be waiting until Friday night. I believe they're the last team in the tournament to play a game. Is that right?
On Friday, yeah.
Yeah. So they will be the last team of all 16 teams to take the court, which again offers them some rest, not necessarily a bad thing. And they will face either the Alabama Crimson Tide, which is the 6th seed, or the winner of the 11-14 game, which is Florida versus Auburn. So most likely you're looking at Alabama, a rematch. Alabama's an NCAA tournament team that beat LSU in overtime. So it's an interesting matchup. And then if you win that one, you are most likely, again, Ole Miss is down there too, which also beat LSU, but most likely you're going to face the 2 seed Texas in a rematch of that loss. So, and that'd be a quick turnaround. You play Friday night and then you play Saturday afternoon against most likely Texas or Ole Miss. So it's kind of a difficult turnaround for LSU, but as we said, Reed, I think more important than trying to put together a run to the SEC title game or an SEC championship, more important is that LSU just get a little bit of confidence back, add a win in there, see some players play well while Flau'jae Johnson rests.
Yeah, a win over at presumably Alabama on Friday, I think would be huge for their confidence, and I think it would also LSU might be back to a 2 seed if they can do that, right? If they can erase the regular season loss to Alabama, they're kind of in a similar position as they were going into that game that they lost. So maybe they climb back up to a 2 seed if they can do that, regardless of what happens on Saturday. I think right now they're looking at a 3 seed. If they lose that first game on Friday, they're probably still going to be a 3 seed. Yeah, that's where they've been each of the last 3 years. Coincidentally, it's where they were when they won the national championship. So it's not impossible to make a run from that position. But it's going to be a little more difficult than it would be if it were a 2 seed. So that's kind of the stakes. That's kind of what they're looking at. And obviously, like we mentioned before, the more intangible side of it is that, you don't want your confidence hurt. You want to get a win. You want to get something in the win column to sort of build up that side, build up your belief before the games really start to count and really start to matter in the NCAA tournament. Suffering 3 straight losses and then going into the tournament is not an ideal situation, but it's a possibility now, and it's what LSU finds itself in going into Greenville.
Yep. So again, the Florida Auburn game, that's Wednesday. The winner of that will play Alabama on Thursday, and the winner of that game plays LSU on Friday. The other part of the bracket, we mentioned South Carolina wins the coin flip there, the 1 seed over Texas. LSU is 3. The other double bye goes to Kentucky. They're number 4. Number 5 is Oklahoma. So you're looking at maybe an Oklahoma-Kentucky rematch. I believe they just played. And then 6 is Alabama, as mentioned. 7's Ole Miss. And then it's interesting, Tennessee was upset by Georgia in their final regular season finale on Sunday, and that gives Vanderbilt the last bye as the 8 seed. Used to be an 8-9, makes no difference. You're playing in the same game no matter what. Now it's a huge deal. The 8 seed gets the bye. The 9 seed, Tennessee's actually got to play the first game of this thing on Wednesday. So interesting. Do you have any predictions, Reed? Do you see a South Carolina, Texas round 3 in the final, especially with LSU presumably focused on the NCAAs at this point, or do you see an upset somewhere?
Yeah, I think that's where we're headed. I think that's where we're headed to South Carolina, Texas. If I had to make a prediction, that's what I would go with. I think I like Kentucky a lot. I think they're really good. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull off an upset, maybe against South Carolina in the semis. I think they're playing really good basketball right now. They just beat Tennessee, but Tennessee, I think that loss to Georgia was really surprising because I'm a big fan of Tennessee and how they play. I think they're the kind of team that if they get hot in this type of situation in a bracket scenario, then they could spoil some hopes, pick off a couple teams, and maybe make a run to the semis. But it's South Carolina and it's Texas. I think those two are the clear top 2 teams, and it should be interesting to see if they can make it to the championship game, because that would be a fun rematch. Well, they've played that would be their 3rd matchup, so that would be interesting to see how that shakes out. And they're probably looking at South Carolina's trying to get a 1 seed, right, in the NCAA tournament, so they've got quite a bit to play for right now. They're probably on the 2 line. So it's looking like if they can maybe upset Texas, then maybe they're back in play for a 1 seed, which would be big for them.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this bracket because, first of all, the addition of Texas means so many years you go into this thing, and it's almost a foregone conclusion that South Carolina is going to win. It's been like that for several years now, and it would take a pretty big upset to avoid that. We don't have that this year, and you also have that added, as you said, the uncertainty of what South Carolina's seed will be. Texas is probably a 1 seed regardless, but and then also teams like LSU, Kentucky, Oklahoma all playing for seeding. So it'll be an interesting tournament. And you head up there Wednesday. Any final thoughts on the week to come here, SEC women's basketball?
Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how LSU approaches this. Just without Flau'jae Johnson, I'd imagine they'd start Kaylin Gilbert. Can they get Kaylin Gilbert going? Can they build her confidence before the NCAA tournament starts? Can you avoid dropping a 3rd straight game? Can you maybe find something at the point guard position finally, something consistent? I think last year Poa and Miracle Shepherd, they both gave LSU good minutes yesterday. But Cheyenne Day-Wilson, we mentioned her inconsistency. I think LSU needs to find something more consistent out of one of those players and really have them to rely on come the NCAA tournament. So I'll be looking at those 2 things. I'll be looking at the bench scoring, see if anybody can step up, give LSU a lift, maybe Samaya Smith, maybe Jersey Wolfenbarger. LSU just needs extra scoring, I think, first and foremost. And we know what Anissa Mora will give. We know what Michaela Williams will give, but we're not exactly sure what the rest of the team can give. And I think if you get a couple more players in double figures, then that might be all LSU needs to win. But it's kind of questionable to see if they can even get that. And I think that's kind of concerning as the SEC tournament starts and the NCAA tournament is right around the corner. So we'll see.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We will be back with Reed, I guess, next week to recap the SEC tournament. It's a little bit weird on the women's side. You kind of have that week gap between the conference tournament and the NCAAs, but we'll certainly be talking before LSU opens play in the NCAA tournament. Going to have another show for you on a Wednesday, I believe. We talk some LSU baseball. They moved up to number 1 in the country this week. So we'll talk that, and we'll also have spring football coming up, as well as, of course, college basketball. So until then, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Appreciate you hanging out, and share with your friends. I saw a comment in there. What can you do for the show? Super chat is always appreciated. Never requested. And you can just share the show with your friends. Always make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. And we appreciate all of that. So for Reed Darcey, our women's basketball beat writer at The Advocate, I'm Zach Ewing. This has been the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, and we will see you next time.